I think are we ready?
You want your microphone?
Okay. Yes. We are streaming, so I'm going to put on our microphone. Good evening, everyone. Thank you again so much for coming out. My name is Cherie Wells. I am your superintendent here at Whitehall City Schools. And first, I just want to say again, thank you. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for your patience. As a mother, I recognize that yesterday was everybody's worst nightmare. To have a call and or to have your kids coming and running and not getting information in the way that you had wanted or not knowing what's going on is the absolute worst situation to be in. And so as a parent myself, what I would want is the opportunity to ask questions. I would want an understanding of what's going on, and I would want the opportunity to be heard and just be able to express how I'm feeling. And so with that in mind, I wanted to host a town hall meeting to give you all that face-to-face opportunity again. Just being thoughtful about what I would want as a parent. So I thank you for taking the time to be here. What our process is going to be this evening, just so we can have some order, and because we're streaming this message, we're going to start with first giving an overview. Our Lieutenant Officer Tanner Williams is going to give an overview of all the events that occurred leading up to yesterday and even up to today. And then you'll hear one of the most frequently asked questions that we're getting, a response to why did we call a level 3, and you'll get that information from our principal, Dr. Boyarko. And then you'll hear from me about next steps, lessons learned, and support needed, and then I'll take time to answer all the questions that you all present. I will ask you that as you're coming up with questions, as you're hearing the information, to please again make use of the QR code. You can do that as often as you want, and or write your questions down and then hand us the form. That way we capture all the questions and we can make sure we answer everything, and so that we can capture that for those who are streaming. That's easier than just taking the hands. And so thank you in advance for supporting us with that. So with that being said, I also want to just acknowledge who's in the room and just thank, we do have board member Lorena Lacey who is here, who represents the Whitehall City Schools Board. We have Lieutenant Tanner Williams, who has been leading this whole effort, and we have Principal Dr. Boyarko and some of our amazing staff at the high school, and Brian Seymour, who's our Deputy Superintendent, and members of my cabinet in the back. So thank you all for being here, and of course you all as families. So with that being said, we're going to start with the most important question, because we keep having this also, what really happened, right? And so with that, I'm going to ask Lieutenant Williams to speak to that.
Thank you, Dr. Wells. Again, I want to echo Dr. Wells' statement. Thanks for being here today. We're sorry that your students had to go through this, that you guys had to go through this. It's a scary situation, and we're going to kind of explain everything that happened right here. So let's just get into it. Also, Lieutenant Tanner Williams, I oversee our day shift patrol division, school resource officer. I also used to be a school resource officer. That's kind of why I took the lead on this. There you go. So yesterday at approximately 11:29 a.m., a caller called into the superintendent's office. The caller identified themselves as the mother of a student. It said that her student was in our high school building with a gun. And then went on to say that she saw this on FaceTime, and that she believes that the student's father gave him the gun. With that information, Dr. Wells immediately notified the high school principal, Dr. Boyarko, who put the school on lockdown as an abundance of safety, and then notified law enforcement, who responded. The initial call that we got was somebody possibly with a gun in the building. This is not an active shooter event. This is not an active threat. This is the possibility that somebody has a weapon in our school building, which is very serious. But it's not that's why you don't get every agency in the area running in lights and sirens type of a response. We had several officers headed to the school. We had a Whitehall Fire Department medic on standby just out of an abundance of caution. And then we began our initial investigation at that point. We were given a name of a student by the caller, of course. The name that was given to us on the call, we quickly were able to determine was not a student at our school building. That was kind of red flag number one, that maybe this isn't a legitimate threat. We were also then able to track down some other things about the phone number that confirmed to us that this was a hoax call, a prank, not a legitimate threat. Unfortunately, at the same time that we were about to end this lockdown, Firestone mechanics were working on a car on the exhaust of the vehicle, and it backfired several times rapidly, and it did make the sound of what sounds similar to gunfire. If you were already concerned that there was an active shooter in your school building and you heard this loud noise, you would think gunfire. Absolutely. I am not disputing that at all. I know that many of the students truly believed that they were being shot at, that they heard gunfire, but I can tell you that we absolutely confirmed that there was never any gunshots fired. At 11:49 a.m. is when our Raven, we use a system called Block. Many of the people tuned into the news for license plate readers. We get a lot of stolen cars, people with warrants that way. Block also has something called Raven, which is gunshot detection, and it did pick up this noise at 11:49 a.m. As you can see, the way it works, it kind of triangulates the sound off of several microphones to an area where the sound originated. It shows just south of Firestone Auto Care on Broad Street. There are there's several audio files. It's different microphones throughout the city. That's how it triangulates. I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is an officer's body camera that picked up this noise that I want to share with you. Would you guys mind playing that video for me?
Good.
Can you play that one more time? Listen very closely. Sorry, it's a lot easier to hear on like a personal computer than it is over these speakers. Right as soon as he says hello, you'll hear it.
Nice. Good.
You guys hear that?
No, I don't hear a single one.
You can stop it, thank you. He was at Burger King on Broad Street, which is right very close to Firestone. He immediately recognized it as not gunshots. I know it's hard to tell in the video, but he was never concerned that shots were fired. He gets on the radio and says, I think somebody's maybe shooting off fireworks or a car backfire. I mean, that's what he's describing on the radio. However, because of the already heightened state of alert and students already in level 3 lockdown, we started to get phone calls of an active shooter. And that is when you got the active shooter response. You got every agency in Central Ohio headed our way. Our 911 was so flooded with 911 calls that it couldn't handle it. It started going to agencies near us. So then Gahanna, Bexley, Franklin County, Columbus, they start getting 911 calls if we can't handle all the ones that we're getting. They start sending their officers. I had agencies from all over Central Ohio sending officers and asking what they could do to help. That is the active shooter response. We were able to quickly determine that this wasn't an active shooter. We determined where the noise was coming from, which was Firestone. But out of an abundance of caution, we still cleared all the immediate area around the school, the neighborhoods, the school property, and the school building itself before releasing the lockdown. Once we were 100% satisfied that there was no threat, the lockdown was lifted. After that, our focus became locating students who had fled, who had run from the school, and reunification students with parents, and then just providing security to the school for the day. And then our investigation as to who did this. I am happy to report that we were able to make an arrest in this case. The arrestee's name is Selena Watts. She's 16 years old. She is not a Whitehall City School student. She was placed under arrest today for swatting, which is a newer Ohio Revised Code section. It's a felony of the 4th degree. She gave a full confession as to her involvement. She told our detectives that she did it as a joke, as a prank. She knew. She was trying to call this in on a Whitehall City School student. She gave the wrong name. She knew that student did not have a gun, she said. She knew that this was a joke. She was doing it to try to be funny. The student that she was trying to call this in on also, according to her, was egging this on and saying, do it, I want to get out of school anyway. Which I'm going to let the principal or Dr. Wells speak about, but we are also looking at possible charges of disciplinary action for that student's involvement as well. This is just us following up at Firestone after the incident with the Firestone employees. If you wouldn't mind playing that video.
Hey, so just kind of fill you in. Please don't do that anymore.
Yeah, just tell them not to do because I don't want our customers to be scared off and then
Well, it reverberated down to past the high school, right? So it was very loud. So a couple things. The high school was already on like a swatting thing, so they were on alert for an active shooter. And then your thing goes off, and then they hear the reverberation for that. So it increased the level to being there's a shooter here, sort of thing. So please don't do that anymore.
So we did follow up with Firestone not to do that anymore. Obviously, you can see in there, they knew what we were talking about. They were admitting to it. I know there's been a lot of questions about what was that noise. I know there's a lot of videos circulating. This was a vehicle backfiring 100%. We were able to 100% without any question verify that that's what that noise was. Lastly, I'd like to talk about our levels of lockdown here at Whitehall High School. Whitehall High School in the city of Whitehall, as you know, partner to have school resource officers in the building, and we also provide safety training for the school and the staff. We go over this safety training as part of every year with every staff member at the beginning of the year. We have 3 levels of lockdown. Level 1 is what we're always at here at the school. The exterior doors are locked. We don't let anybody in except for through the front office door. They have to sign in. We've got the new Navigate 360, that's what it's called.
Visitor management system.
Visitor management system, where your ID gets swiped. It does an automatic background check. Checks for things like sex offenders, violent warrants, things like that. And of course, there's a pop-up and say, don't let this person in if they're trying to get in the building. So level 1 is really what we are always at here. A level 2 would be business as usual in your classroom, but nobody leaves the class. There's no bathroom breaks. There's no changing of class periods. And there's several reasons why we would use this. You know, maybe an unknown person spotted in the building, maybe a threat in the building that's not an active shooter or anything like that. We also use it for medical emergencies. If we have a kid who has some sort of a medical issue, an emergency where we're going to have to bring medics into the building, we'll sometimes put the building on a level 2 lockdown so that medics can get to that person, provide aid to them, and get out without students walking up and down the hallways. It's safer for everyone that way, and it gives some privacy to the student that's having a medical emergency. Level 3 lockdown, what we went into yesterday, as you can see on your sheet, that is for active shooter events, active aggressor events. We follow the run, hide, fight methodology here. That is put out by the FBI. It is what the FBI recommends. It is what Ohio State and many other colleges use. It's what many private businesses use. It's very easy to remember. That's why we use it. We are certified. All of our school resource officers are certified through ALERT, which is Advanced Law Enforcement Rapid Response Training. The FBI considers them the gold standard in training for law enforcement response to active shooter. They also provide a class called Civilian Response to Active Shooter Events. That is what our school resource officers are trained in, certified in to teach this class. And that is the training that we provide to the staff. The first part of the run, hide, fight, of course, is run. And that is all about if you can get out, if you can get away from the threat to do that. It should be, if you know where the threat is, and you know you can get out safely, then get out. So if I know that the threat is at the other end of the building, at the back of the building, by the auditorium, and I'm up at the front of the building, I should get out and run away from the building to get away from the threat. That is how you are most safe, is to be away from the threat, which is why it's option number 1. The keys there are knowing where the shooter is or where the aggressor is. and knowing that you can get out safely. And Dr. Wells is going to talk about, more about this in next steps, but we have identified some areas where we think we can improve on. The next step in that is hide or deny access to your location. Get into a classroom, any room, lock the door, barricade the door with whatever you have. Deny access, hide from the threat. Don't let them get to you. That is the second way that you're the most safe. Turn off the lights, turn your cell phone volume down, things like that. And then lastly, and hopefully no one ever has to come to this, but fight or defend yourself. If at all costs, if you can't do the other two, if you can't run and you can't hide, your only other option is to fight for your life and the life of those with you. So run, hide, and fight, that's where that comes from. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Boyarko, the high school principal.
Thank you. So when I received the call yesterday morning that it was believed there was a gun in the building, that it was shown on FaceTime, in my mind, that gun is out. I have two options in a split second to make that decision. I can wait to hear gunshots, which means it's too late for someone. Or I can act quickly and put the building on a lockdown level 3. That's what I did, because I did not want to take the chance of having someone be shot or killed before I move into action. So that was my thought process. That is what I did. From there, the staff, as Lieutenant Tanner had mentioned, depending on where they were located and what they were doing, they either hid or ran. So, and with that.
All right, thank you. So again, there's nothing that we can say that will take away the frustration, the fear, the concern, everything that you all experienced yesterday. But again, as a parent, I wanted to provide this opportunity and just say to you a couple things. Number one, as a superintendent, I'm extremely grateful. I'm grateful that this was a false alarm. I'm grateful that even though this was a situation that has caused a lot of confusion, it allowed us to practice and see where some of our loopholes are that we need to tighten up on. So if we're ever in this situation again, we know what we need to do. I'm grateful that our staff had the training the week before because they actually followed all of the protocols as expected. So I'm really appreciative of the situation in the sense that we were able to, in my opinion, what doesn't break us makes us stronger. And I feel like as a result of this, we're going to be stronger based on having better protocols and learning from this situation. Now, what's important to me is this. Our motto is that we are relationship-driven, resourceful, resilient, and ready. For me, it's important that we have a relationship and that you feel that you can trust us. And that's why we're having this conversation. So the point for me in saying that is we want to make sure that we answer all of your questions, and I want to be clear with you so you know who I am. I am going to be with you for the next 4 years. I'm your superintendent, want to be here, chose to be here because I believe in what can happen in this community, and part of that is building that trust. And unfortunately, we know in the society that we live in, there's a lot of distrust, but I'm committed to working and letting you know that we're in this together. So with that being said, I do want to communicate some of the things that we've learned and what some of our next steps are. And again, I do remind you, for your questions, to do the QR code and fill out the form so I can answer those for you. So here's what we've learned. Number one, the biggest question that we're getting is why were kids asked to flee? Why were they told to leave and run and go wherever they wanted to go? That's a very important question. And what you heard Lieutenant Tanner say is that through the training, because run is what our students are expected to do because that's the safest thing, that's what our staff heard. So as a result of that training, when they got scared and they saw that, they said, run, go to your safe place, go home, go wherever you can, there's an active shooter. Our staff thought it was real because that's all they knew. And so they gave that advice. What we have learned from that is that we cannot do that. We have to be able to account for our kids. So we have given you a copy of our lockdown drills and the updates that we're making. You have a copy of that in front of you, and what you will see on there is the change that is being made is that run is the last resort, and it's only to be used if you know where the threat is, like Lieutenant Sanders says. So if you know for sure that the active shooter is in the auditorium and you're in the front of the building and can get out safely, that's when you run. But if you run and when you run, we will identify designated spaces that the staff will take students to, and then at that point, they will notify us where they are and notify the police, and the police will come there to ensure students are safe, and we will get that message out to you so you know where your kids are. The reality of what will happen if, God forbid, we're ever in a real situation, is you will not have any access. You won't be able to get anywhere near this building because SWAT will be here, police will be here, medics will be here. So coming to the building is really not even going to be an option. So you'll need to know where your kids are, and we'll make sure that information gets out to you, because getting here is going to be very difficult because the police take over at that point. So that's one lesson learned. Number one, we have to account for kids. We can't just tell them to run. We will at this point moving forward, and this is the message that was given to our staff today. We will have a relocation site. You will take attendance. You will let us know where you're at. The police will then meet you at that site, and we'll be able to get some communication out. That's number one. The second thing that we learned is people are human. Although a lot of our staff, every single one of our staff had the training, they participated in the training, in the midst of the moment, people got scared and forgot what they were supposed to do. And so that says to us, practice makes perfect, so we need to increase the amount of times that we practice these processes. We also need to make sure in the heat of the moment, everybody has something on them that they can refer to. So all of our staff will have these. This is a lockdown card, what to do for each level of lockdown, a quick reference, so there's no question. If they forget, it's all right there with them. Staff are expected to wear these along with their IDs at all times. So we are increasing training. We also are going to do the training with our kids. We need to practice with them so they know what to expect. And so that will be a part of what we're putting in place also. So they will also have the information and know exactly what to do. And I would encourage you to have that conversation with your kids. Do you know what to do? Do you know where to go? If so, here's where I'm going to meet you. Here's who to call. So we're all in this together, but that information will be communicated. Our kids will practice. Our staff will practice. And we'll all know exactly what to do. Dr. Boyarko will be having meetings with the kids next week to kind of clarify. They'll get the same information that you all are receiving, because we know our kids have questions. They're also making up a lot of stuff, as kids do. And so we are going to communicate and clarify with them what all occurs so they also can be comfortable and understand what we're going to be doing moving forward. So that is our next lesson learned and our next steps. The next one is communication. And I heard this a lot, and it is valid. We got notified late. Why did we get notified late? The message that you put on the video was different than what we actually heard happen, and all the things that are coming with communication. There are a lot of different reasons that things had occurred, so I'll clarify some of that, and then I'll share with you what we're doing differently. The first is when we found out that we were at a place where we were going to do when we found out that the situation was cleared and that it was a prank, as soon as that was known, I decided to make the video to say, hey parents, here's what's happening. We're able to go back to class as normal. What I didn't know when I was in my office making that video was that parents and everybody started coming, and that the kids were scared and they didn't want to be in school anymore. So at that point, we weren't able to return to class as normal because kids were ready to go home, parents were ready to get their kids. That was one. In terms of when the communication was getting out, again, at the time, there's a lot of things that are happening. We're trying to account for kids. We're trying to figure out if there's an active threat. We're dealing with the shots in the neighborhood. So we're communicating as quickly as possible, but it was delayed because what we need to do, and this is going to be our adjustment, is establish a communication center. At the time, it was myself and the director of communications just trying to get information out. You do this, you do that, but it just took too much time. So we're establishing a communication command center. There'll be more people involved so the messages can get out quicker. And the other thing that we learned, and again, this was part of our learning for staff. Again, our staff thought it was real up until the very end. And that's a very traumatizing situation to be in, and we own that. So along with the communication, we're going to be more clear. If we're in a level 2 lockdown, we will say to our staff, we're in a level 2 lockdown, here's why, here's where. So they are aware of what's going on. It's a threat, it's not an active shooter, so we can clarify that. The second layer of that is for our parents, is then they will communicate that to students. So if you are communicating with your child via cell phone or text, we will be saying to students, let your parents know you're safe. Let them know you're in this room and that there's a threat, but it's being investigated and that you're okay. So that there's clear communication about what is happening and why, and is happening on all sides and getting it from multiple layers. With that being said, what I remind you of is that we need to make sure we have your contact information. We will communicate with you through 4 different means. We will post on Facebook. We will also send a text, we will send an email, and we will send a phone dialer. That all goes through our Infinite Campus parent portal system. So please make sure all of that information is uploaded and up to date and accurate. If you need support with that, our secretaries can help you. But please double check and verify your information. So that is how the information will get out. So that's the communication lesson. The next is what we saw and what we learned is reunification. When you all came as parents, it was like, where's my kid? We had to find them and figure out where and how to try to move people around to make sure you can get your kids. And so we are developing a process, again, because we know if there's a real situation, you won't have access to the building. So right now, we're going to be having a follow-up meeting with the police department, debriefing with the staff to make sure we have a solid plan for reunification to be able to give you guidance about here's where you can get your kid and how we check out. The added layer to that we also learned, because there was so much going on, kids were wanting to get out, parents were wanting their kids, we were just letting kids go. We cannot do that. And so another part of that process, you heard Lieutenant Tanner Williams reference the visitor management system. Through our visitor management system, what that will mean is that you have to show your ID, and we'll be able to document, okay, Auntie so-and-so picked up your child, so you can know. Or the parent picked up their child, we'll have it all documented. It'll be in our computer system, and we'll know exactly who went where. So that is the plan for beginning to really solidify a reunification process and making sure we're able to account for the students. And last but not least, as I mentioned to you, trust and transparency. One thing that you will know about me is I don't hide anything. I'm going to tell you what's going on, good, bad, or indifferent. I'm going to own whatever problems we have so that you know. So as a part of a continued transparency, we will continue to post updates. It'll be on our website. It'll be through phone dialers. If you have a question at any time, you can reach out and contact us, and I'll answer your questions. We will continue with transparency. Here's the improvements that we're making. Here are the changes. You'll be able to keep up with what we're doing. So that is my commitment to you. There's always going to be an open book with what we're doing and how we're doing things and why. And so that is what the lessons that we've learned. These are the plans that we're planning to put in place to address some of the things that we were able to observe based on the situation from yesterday. With that being said, we do need your help. So I've shared what we've committed to. Here's where we need your help. If you hear something, and you will hear your kids talking about things. Some of it will be true, some of it will be not true. We need you to clarify. What are you talking about? Who did what? And you need us to let us know. The more we know, the faster we can able to intervene and make sure our kids are safe. And we also need you to encourage your kids to do the same. Hear something, see something, say something to keep us all safe. Sometimes kids don't want to talk, but you'll hear something and you can just say, hey, this is what I heard. I don't know if it's true or false. Even if it feels small, let us know. There's nothing too small for us to research and just find out whether it's credible or not. So we need your help with that. The other thing we need, unfortunately yesterday, and we are going to follow up with you as parents and with our students, we had several students who were not listening, were not compliant, were laughing, making this whole situation feel like a joke. We need you to help us reiterate that safety is very important. This was not funny. It was not a situation that was any laughing matter. It scared you, it scared our staff, it scared our kids, and it's not funny at all. So we need you to help with the messaging around making prank calls is not a joke. If you're going into a lockdown drill, take it seriously. Even though it's practice, practice the way you perform. We are in this together, and we need everybody to be very serious about maintaining our safety. Unfortunately, we know that across our nation, sometimes people make bad choices, and this is unfortunately a reality that could happen. So we need to, I'm one who always says, we hope for the best, but we plan for the worst. And planning means you practice, and you know exactly what to do and take it seriously. So we need your help with that messaging. Next, again, in our constant effort about building trust, please know we are doing everything in the best interest of your kids. There's nothing that we're trying to do, nothing that we're trying to hide. Trust us. And if you're not really trusting us, have the conversation. Talk to me about why. Help me understand what would build the trust. Because again, we're in this together. For however many years you have your kids left in the school, whatever experiences you've had in the past with previous administration, I am a different administrator. I am here to support you, make sure you feel comfortable and that your kids are getting the best education. And my interest is your child's interest, along with the safety of our staff and all of our kids. Next, again, I mentioned this already, our students were communicating information that was not accurate. They were saying all kind of stuff, so we need you to help message with your children, and you also, if you will, only communicate the facts as shared, because all the rumors of here's what I think happened, here's what I believe happened, when you put it out there on social media, people think it's true and it's not, and then that makes things worse, and then people get excited and they build upon it, just becomes this spiral. So we need you to also remind your kids, do not say what you think. Tell me what is going on. Be factual what's happening, even when they're communicating with you, so that you can have a solid understanding and know what's happening. So if you can help us with that, the facts are important, not the beliefs, not the thoughts, not the guesses, but truly the facts of what's happening. And last but not least, with all of this, as we continue to grow together, please continue to be patient. We're learning from every situation. There's no situation that we can 100% plan for. Everything's unexpected. You never know when you have 1,000 kids and 3,300 kids and 400 staff. Something's bound to happen, but we're always going to do our best to respond in a way that makes the most sense as quickly as possible. So just continue to exercise patience, and again, if you're frustrated, talk to us about it. I'm happy to work through it with you. All right, so with that being said, again, my promise to you is to answer the questions that you have. And so I do want to go through the questions that have been submitted. If you have not, write it down. We have people who will come around and collect it from you, or do the QR code.
I have a pen. You want a piece of paper?
Is there anybody who has a question on the paper that you want us to collect? All right, so one question is, why were students told to run? I think I answered that. They were told to run based on the safety training that was originally given. And then what was the exact threat that was made to the school? The exact threat that was made to the school was that we had a gun in the building that was reported by what was said to be a parent. What really happened, like the truth, we shared everything that we have in terms of the details. This comment says, my son said he heard gunshots. Again, there were no gunshots in the area. There was backfiring that sounded like gunshots. The other question that's on here, why was it a level 3 for a prank phone call? And again, you heard from our principal. And as a superintendent, even though this caused a major panic for everybody, again, I would rather that she err on the side of the most cautious than something worse happen and we not. And so the level 3 was taken out of abundance of caution to make sure that if there was a threat, that we had everybody locked down in the way that they could be and should be. All right, the next question. Same thing, why was there a prank call and we went into lockdown? What happened that the staff made that decision? I shared that already. Why were the students told to run was another question. I already answered that. Why were the same questions? Why were students told to run? Same, a lot of the same. Why were the students on the first floor told to flee? I answered that one.
In some classrooms do have exterior doors. So with the staff, if they had an exterior door, and at that time, you know, the threat was inside instead of outside, until unfortunately when they went to their first safe space, which was the football field, and that's when they heard the other shots and ran. But some classrooms actually have exterior doors, so it's very easy to exit from that classroom instead of staying inside where the threat was perceived to be.
Here's a new question. Speak to the fire drill. There was a question about why kids were on the fire drill.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we have required fire drills, so many per year. The first week of school, teachers take their kids out to practice for the actual fire drill so that kids know where they're going, so that when we have the fire drill, it's not mad chaos with over 1,000 kids not sure where to go. So a few of the classrooms were doing their practice fire drills. They were already outside when the lockdown was called. So that was what happened there.
And I was just going to follow up. So they did not come back in the building where the threat was perceived to be. They went through step 1 in that level 3 lockdown, which is run.
The other question that's on here that's unique is are we getting metal detectors? And so we are having conversations, we've been having conversations with our school board. There are a lot of layers and factors that are involved with metal detectors. One is the cost, and two primarily is the management of it all. When you implement metal detectors, you have to have the staff to do the wanding and the police to do the search and all of the things. And so we're working through the logistics and the cost of that. So as of right now, we do not have metal detectors, but we are exploring that as an option for increased safety in our schools. There's a question about who was the student that was detained.
Yeah, I can speak to that. We've gotten this question a couple of times. We have the Whitehall Division of Police has no record of us detaining any students or searching any students yesterday. I've seen this post on social media. I've seen a picture with it, and it shows a student standing next to a police car. That police car is not a Whitehall Division of Police car. As I mentioned earlier, we had agencies from all over Central Ohio and beyond coming in to assist with this for what was believed to be, because of the calls coming in, believed to be an active shooter event. Again, I haven't been made aware of any student that was actually detained or searched or anything like that. I'm not saying that that student is lying. I am not saying that that didn't happen. I'm just saying that it was not the Whitehall Division of Police, and I do not know about that incident. So if somebody does have more information about that, or would like to come forward and talk about that, please contact the police department. I'd love to talk to you.
Thank you. All right, there's a question on here about why was an SRO removed to protect the mayor? You want to speak to that, or you want me to answer?
Sure. There was no SROs that have been removed to protect the mayor. I'm not going to discuss the mayor's security, but what I will tell you is that you've had police officers in your school since day one of the school year this year and before to provide safety training. There's been no lapse in police officers being in the schools. There have been police officers here every single day, just like there normally would be. So any other statement other than that would be false.
Thank you. There's a question about why were staff saying that they didn't know what to do. Again, I shared with you, our staff were trained, but in the moment, there were several staff who just kind of froze and weren't remembering exactly what the protocols were. And again, we're addressing that through additional training and providing at-a-glance resources for them. There's a question here about why did we have a lockdown now but not last year where there were bomb threats. We are to do lockdowns every year, and so that is a part of what we're going to continue to make sure we do. We are going to increase all of our drills again so that practice makes perfect. How does a car backfiring miles away sound like a gun?
You know, I think we've answered that. We've been able to provide video of what that sounded like. You know, there's nothing really more that I can do to convince anybody otherwise. You've got the mechanics saying that they did it. We've got video of what the noise sounded like. So.
You can answer this one too. Why were some students released and some students not? Like kids on the upstairs weren't released while others were. We kind of talked about this with the drills. But if you're on a first floor classroom with an exterior door, you know that it's safe to get out because there is no threat between you and the exterior door to get away from where the perceived threat is. So those teachers took that opportunity and they had their students run to get them to safety. However, if you're on the second and third floor, you don't know where the threat is. You don't know if the threat is on the first floor. You don't know if the threat's in the stairwell. You don't know if the threat's right outside your classroom door. So for those classrooms, it wouldn't have been safe for them to flee or to run. Their only option at that point was to hide or prepare to fight. Thank you. With that being said, another question is, who decides on the run option?
The run option.
Whether you run, hide, or fight?
Okay, yes. So that is up to, really it's up to the teacher in the classroom. When we put out a level 3 lockdown, we will put it out with as much information as we have at the time that we can give. So if we know and we're able to say, you know, a level 3 lockdown, active shooter by the auditorium, that lets classrooms at the front of the building know to get out. And vice versa, if we said level 3 lockdown, active shooter, cafeteria, then those front of the building classrooms would go into hide, and the back of the building classrooms would go into run. But that is dependent on where you are, and it is at the teacher's discretion really to do what they think is best for the safety of the students in their class.
That also answers the question that's in here about why was a decision to evacuate Wade without police security. And so again, as soon as there's a level 3 lockdown based on the initial training that was given, teachers made the decision to either run, hide, or fight, and run, hide, or fight. Again, our protocols clarify, so that should not happen moving forward. So that was the reason for that. With the 2 options, while locking down the building, any level an alert is supposed to be sent out. The question was about communication and the 3 hours, why it took so long. The information was actually sent out prior to 3 hours. The first video was well within the 3 hour well before that. In terms of why the delay was, as I mentioned, it was just myself, and for those of you who showed up, you kind of saw me here kind of dealing with the situation, and so stopping and getting information out is kind of what caused some of that delay. Again, in response to that, we're putting in a different system to make sure we have greater communication so more people can get the information out in a more timely manner. Well, I think this question is around the relocation sites, and so we are continuing to determine that. We have an idea of what they are, but for safety, as of right now, we're not going to broadly say, here's where we're telling kids to go. Because the other thing that we have to keep in mind is if somebody is planning something, we don't necessarily want everybody to know that. So what we will do at the time, the teachers will know, and at the time we will share, here's where we're going, and put that information out. But we would not necessarily share right away, right now, exactly where we're going to tell kids to go, because again, those who do have the idea of wanting to hurt somebody, the more information they have, the better they can plan for that type of an incident. And so we don't want to provide that type of information. What is the protocol for level 3 lockdown if the kids are outside?
Kind of mentioned this earlier when we talked about the fire drills. If you're outside of the building and we go into a level 3, meaning there's an active aggressor in the building, of course the protocol would be your only option is to run. You know, there's nowhere to hide outside until you get to a safe place. You're certainly not going to come back in the building where you believe there is a threat. So of course the option at that point was to run to a safe place.
Why were teachers telling students there was an intruder in the school? Again, the teachers had no information other than when you're level 3, and a level 3 assumes that there's a threat in the building. The next one is, why were students' backpacks searched?
We did not search any backpacks yesterday. I can tell you I did not, and my assistant principals did not. I'm not aware of any backpack being searched.
And that may go back to this other incident where the police detained someone and maybe searched them. Like I said, I'm still looking for more information on that. So if anybody has information, please contact the police department.
The next question, how often are drills practiced with staff? Staff have required training every year, so that's annually. Again, we'll be increasing that. And so right now, that is annually. It is at the beginning of the year. The training was, every time we have our professional development days before school begins, we have our training. Well, not every time, but that's when it occurred this year. Why did so many kids say their classroom door was being turned multiple times like someone was trying to get in? We could talk about release from a lockdown.
Sure. If you're on a level 3 lockdown, active aggressor in the building, the only way to come out of a level 3 lockdown is for the police and school administrators to go door to door and individually unlock each door to let them out. There's several reasons for this. If, I hate to go into like absolutely worst case scenarios, but if an administrator is being held hostage and they're being told to knock on the door and tell them to open it, things like that, we don't want somebody inside to open that door. If the bad guy's outside and knocking on the door, pretending to be a student or trying to get in, we don't want them to open the door. So we will have to go around and individually unlock each door. As part of our safety checks, we went through and made sure doors were locked, because if a door wasn't locked, as part of securing the building, we would need to go in and make sure it was safe in that room. So if they heard the door handles being touched or something like that, it was probably the police or an administrator coming through, making sure the door was locked to make sure we didn't need to check that room.
All right, next question, why weren't students searched? So students were not searched in this particular situation because the threat was deemed not credible. If we were to, again, feel like that the threat was credible, the police would search and detain the student. And so in this situation, as if it were just a level 2 and there's a threat that's part of our investigation, there was not a need to search students because, again, it was a prank call. The next question. Why is there a student who's allowed back in this year who was expelled last year for bringing a weapon to school? So by state law, I don't know if you all heard the question, is relative to expulsion. By state law, students can only be expelled up to 120 days. And so students have to be allowed to return to school after they've served the penalty for whatever their action was. So that is by state law, students have to be returned to school after they serve their consequence. Once the lockdown was called, what amount of time did it take officers to enter the building? Our officers were actually already here. Our SRO was already here and was within 1 or 2 more minutes. I think we probably had 5 or 10 officers come right away after that. So fortunately, because they're down the street, that was an immediate quick turnaround. But again, our police officers were already here on the site. We had at least 1 police officer here at the initial call. Do you have safety locations in the community? Yes, that is part of the plan. The relocation sites will be areas within the community. How did you feel comfortable with releasing a statement saying everyone is returning safe without verifying and calling the missing parents? So the statement was that all of our students had returned as far as we knew to the building. We were going based on the information at the time. So that's the other thing that I want to mention relative to patients. Part of being transparent is going to me sharing information. What we need everybody to understand is that information changes rapidly. And so it's not about like trying to say one thing and then meaning something else. It's just that as information comes about, new information happens and so things change. With the example, for example, we thought it was a prank call that involved another student in another district. Upon further investigation, we find out it's actually it's a prank call, but it involved 2 students, one here and one in another school, who were saying, go ahead and I want to get out of class anyway. So again, I am going to share the information that's given to me at the time, and it's possible that that information will change. It just depends on what's coming in and what's coming out, and so that's part of communication. So as we're being transparent and sharing information, information may change based on the details that are known at that time. Since it's clear improvement is needed, is there consideration of hiring armed security? Does this procedure for level 3 apply for all district schools, and will you increase the training? So we actually have had discussions around that. As of right now, because we have our school resource officers in our buildings, there's not conversation about adding additional security. I read the question out, I don't remember the other part of it.
Training.
Training, yes, we're going to continue with more training. Does the procedure apply to all schools in the district? Yes. So the level 3 lockdowns that you have in front of you, the 3 different levels does apply to every building. All of our school systems have the same expectations and protocols that will be followed. Have you gathered information from schools that have actually had an active shooter about the protocols they've put in place? Go ahead.
Yes, we have. We have officers and staff members who attend the Ohio School Safety Summit every year, and that they provide this data. We also continuously get information from the Secret Service, who compiles information on active shooter events, and specifically school active shooter events. And the training or the lockdown level that we use, this run, hide, fight method, is the gold standard in active shooter response right now for civilians. It is what the FBI teaches. It's what most colleges use these days in most school districts.
And I'll add to that, fortunately we have not had that many here in Central Ohio, but we do meet monthly with all the superintendents in the area and kind of talk about best practices and share information. And so we are in constant communication about as things arise, how did it work, what are you doing, and that'll be the same for this situation. So we're constantly having conversations about improvements based on the experiences that others have had. The question that was also just asked, can I clarify what I mean about that student versus our student? So the original prank call was that, hey, I'm calling, when I picked up the phone, calling to let you know that there is a gun in the high school. I said, how do you know that? Tell me more. And the response was, I'm a parent. of the name of this student. They're in the bathroom FaceTiming me, showing me the gun that their father gave. And the name of the student that they gave was a student actually was in our system 5 years ago. So we called the parent of that student to say, hey, this is the call that we're getting. That parent says, my child no longer goes to your district. They're actually in Groveport. We called Groveport. Groveport confirmed the student was there. And the sad part about all this, she gave the wrong name. So this student at Groveport got pulled out of class, got searched. This parent got alarmed, and it did not involve them at all. But since then, again, due to the great detective work, what we found out was the student who was doing the prank was a friend of one of our new students here, and they basically were going back and forth about, you should do a prank call, you should do a prank call. I'm going to call the school. Go ahead, I want to get out of class anyway. And so that's what we have found out about the situation.
And
so that's
then
what I meant about the two students. Go ahead.
So we found that out just a couple hours ago. That student was searched today to make sure, and consequences are happening as well.
Absolutely not anything that we're taking lightly. The student will be being put up for an expulsion hearing, and the other student, as you all heard, has charges and has been arrested, the one who actually made the call.
Who was not a Whitehall student.
Yes. How do you ensure our children are safe when the student who has knowingly intended to hurt our children are allowed back? What do you know about trauma caused to staff and families? And will there be trauma-informed teachers who can deal with the attitude of children who are coming and struggling? In terms of students who have made mistakes and are coming back to school, as a part of our expulsion protocols, there's several things that families have to do before they are able to be readmitted. One is they have to verify, this is part of some of their, depending on the situation, that they've had the child go through counseling. We have a reentry program where they also have to meet with our counselors and develop a plan. And so we monitor students who are also in those types of situations. And so again, one of the things that we know is young people make bad choices and they do stuff that they don't always fully understand. So we're also not about the business of just punishing kids forever. Fortunately, for the most part, when students make a bad choice, they do learn from that behavior and don't continue after a period of expulsion or suspension. But the kids who are in that situation, based on our protocols and based on their consequences, do have to go through some steps and processes before they return. The next part of the question was, in terms of trauma-informed, so we do provide training to our staff about trauma-informed care and restorative justice, so that is a part of the trainings that we provide. We also have a social worker in every building that provides that support for our staff, and we also have counselors. And so as students who are experiencing either kind of trauma or frustrations or issues, we do have the resources to support those students as well as our staff. That is actually the conversation we had as a part of our 2-hour delay. We talked a lot to our staff again. Unfortunately, we had our staff who were calling their families like, hey, I don't know what's happening. I might go home and not be able to make it home. So our staff were also traumatized. And so a part of the support that we provided is the opportunity to talk with our social workers and our counselors. And we also have an employee assistance program where free counseling is provided to our staff as well. So we do make sure that people are fully supported in the best way that we can. Go ahead. Go ahead.
There's a question about, since the level 3 that we use at the high school applies to all schools, and how does this affect, young elementary school age kids? We do have the same levels of lockdown for all of our schools. Run, hide, fight still applies, even in our elementary school buildings, because our custodians and people who don't have students in those buildings, if their best option to run, then they should run. But know that our teachers know that in an elementary school building or in our, the C-Ray building, running is not going to be an option for them. We understand that. We don't expect little kids to just run out into the street. We would never put them in that situation. And those teachers know that their options are going to be to hide and fight. And that's not the students fighting, of course. We don't expect, little elementary school kids to be fighting. But we do, unfortunately, if it happened, we would expect that our teachers and our staff members would fight to protect the lives of our students and for themselves. So, yes, the levels of lockdown, run, hide, fight still applies in an elementary school setting, but it does apply differently.
Another question, are students who ran going to get in trouble or subject to any disciplinary action? Absolutely not. This was a situation where they were doing what they knew to do and or were told to do. So not only will they not receive discipline, we have excused absences for yesterday and today, and we'll continue to support our students. This is not something that we will hold kids accountable for in terms of running away. Are you working on a uniform protocol for all Ohio schools, or at least Central Ohio schools?
I kind of mentioned this earlier. This run, hide, fight is a pretty national standard. You also hear ALICE a lot with the schools. It's just a different acronym that kind of goes into the same thing. So yes, this is pretty uniform across, really across the country at this point.
Will training be in the classroom? And so as we practice the drills, that is where the training will occur. By the classroom, the kids will be practicing. It'll be as all school. Will it be simulated training? It depends on which parts of the training we'll do. I'm told that WPD can provide simulating training if requested.
Yeah, we do provide training to our teachers. We try to provide it every year. It doesn't always happen every year, but we do try to provide it every year. It's an after-school voluntary training that just goes more in-depth on this level 3 lockdown. We actually bring in honor guard rifles that fire blank rounds because we want them to hear what that sounds like in a building. We want them to experience that in a training setting before it's the real thing. Of course, that could be very traumatizing for a child. We've never done it with students in the building. There'd be a lot that would go into anything like that. But we do provide the absolute best training that we can. And any suggestions on bettering that training or anything else we can do for the schools, we're happy to provide.
And I want to clarify that. As a school district, staff are trained on what to do for each of these levels. The simulated training is actually dressing up and pretending there's an active shooter and people walking through the buildings and police walking through the building pretending to shoot. That is training that can be provided. When and if we do that, we'll let everybody know. Again, because of the nature of that and that involving the entire school and some of the trauma that may be provided, we're thinking through what that looks like. As a state, every 3 years, there's other requirements that are also required. So there's different levels of training that our staff go through, and the simulation is a part of that. And so we're continuing to build upon that training to make sure people know what they're doing. That was part of this last question, I think. Why during the situation teachers weren't clarified, even staff members who didn't know what to do. You say the training and let teachers know, but they still weren't sure. So again, part of that is why we say we're going to reiterate and continue to have ongoing training. What we learned from this situation is, again, in the heat of a moment, people panic and don't remember everything. So the more you practice, the more comfortable you are, the more things become second nature. And so we will increase the amount of training we're providing. In addition to that, we'll give them the cards so there's a quick reference. So it is true that some of our staff were like, I'm not quite sure, I didn't remember. And so that did occur. And so we're going to take steps to make sure that doesn't happen again. See anything else on there?
Did you get Ms. Lacey's list?
Yes.
Okay.
My child's afraid to return to home. What's a suggestion on how I can talk to them to be prepared to return Monday?
Oh, okay.
I thought that was good.
My child is afraid to return. What are some suggestions you can give on what to say? Thank you for that question. So I think first and foremost is to remind them that the situation was not real. And the other thing is to remind them is that school is the safest place for our young people, and there are a lot of reasons for that. Number one, as I mentioned, we're always in a level 1 lockdown. That means all of our doors are locked. As a matter of fact, we have alarms on every single door. People cannot go in and out of any door without an alarm going off. The only point of entry is the front entry. And when you come in through the front door, it's locked. You have to go into the office to see a staff member. And upon entering the office, you must show ID. New this year, we have a visitor management system. That visitor management system means that you have to swipe your driver's license. If an alert comes up because of a background check, you're not admitted into the building. So this is the safest place for students. In addition to that, we have a police officer who's here every single day. We have staff members that are here every single day. We have counselors who are here every single day. We have administrators who are constantly visible. So you can encourage your child, again, to let them know that this is the safest place for them. We have police on staff. It is very secure. And if they're concerned and they want to talk through some of their fears, again, we have staff who can support them with that. And so those are some of the things that I would suggest just to encourage your kid. And I think the other thing too is that if there's anything going on, when they get home, they can share with you and you will let us know right away. Like, that's part of the collaboration. And I mean that with all sincerity. Dr. Boryarko is one who constantly responds to families. Any small thing, no matter what it is, she is going to respond right away and keep you guys informed and be open to conversations. And so if your child is communicating to you, and again, I wish to ask you to share who that child is before you leave today with her, so that when the child returns on Monday, we can have that one-on-one conversation and reassure them and talk them through their fears. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, and just to reiterate, we will have grade level meetings. We will process everything that happened, and we'll revisit the protocols, and we will answer any question the kids have to make sure they feel comfortable and safe. And then, of course, we will reassure them that the police solved the issue and there is no threat.
There's another question on the, or I don't know, question statement about officers being rude at pickup. I apologize if that was your experience. Certainly, it's not our goal to be rude. We experienced this just like everybody else did. Our staff wasn't sure if this was a shooting, if this was somebody with a gun, what this is. So we are also in a heightened state of stress. I am not making an excuse for any officer who was rude. If there was an officer who was rude, we do have a responsibility to try to keep order, to try to make this a safe and efficient reunification process. We're here to control the crowd. That is never a fun job when people are elevated and emotional, which they have every right to be. Our job is to try to keep calm in the chaos. So again, if there was an officer that was rude, I certainly will look into that. I've not had an opportunity to review body cameras. I will spend several hours reviewing body cameras, evaluating our response to make us better for next time. And of course, if I find anything of an officer being rude or out of line, it'll be addressed.
There's another question about the policy on allowing staff to bear arms. And so there's a couple things with that. First, we do not have a policy that allows that. We are a weapon-free school with the exception of our police officers. At this moment, what we know in terms of allowing people to bear arms is that means there's more weapons in the building, which means there's more access to accidents, and people are human. Laying a gun down, having a gun in the midst of a moment taken off of an adult by a student, all kinds of things can happen. So at this very moment right now, because of having our police officers in the building and the proximity of our police officers, right now that is the best decision that we've made in terms of, that is not a policy that we're moving towards at this moment in terms of allowing staff to bear arms. You want to, anything else? All right, I believe we kind of answered everything, but again, I invite you to stay. If you have questions that were not answered, please feel free to come up and talk with us. If you do have a child who is concerned or needs some follow-up on Monday, please also share that information directly with Dr. Boryarko so that we can make sure we do that one-on-one touch base. Thank you again, and again, I apologize. I know, again, I must end as I started, that yesterday was what could have been the worst nightmare. As a parent, I relate to that. But hopefully you are understanding of why that decision was made and also understanding of how we're growing from that. So again, I thank you for taking the time to come out. If you have other questions, I am here to answer those questions for you and appreciate you all for being here. Have a good night.